Good morning to you. Grace and peace from the Inland Empire, where all the smog from this great city stays. Before I begin, the text this morning is from Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. O Lord, you have enticed me, and I was enticed. You have overpowered me, and you have prevailed. I have become a laughingstock all day long. Everyone mocks me. For whenever I speak, I must cry out. I must shout violence and destruction. For the word of the Lord has become for me a reproach and derision all day long. If I say I will not mention him or speak his name anymore, then within me there's something like a fire burning in my bones. I am weary with holding it in, and I cannot. Every morning before the sun goes up on the streets outside, there's an army here that fans out across the streets through the city. Quiet, unseen, stealth forces conducting secretive missions, back alleyways moving house to house, equipped with rusted out bikes, pedals broken off, seats held together with layers of tape, large plastic bags, their weapons in this fight, living off our leftovers, surviving on our scraps and our waste, or trying to at least. And it's war out there, life and death on the streets. Nightfall brings another kind of combat. Car horns, steam vents, bus stops, fighting lines of ants for sidewalk space, living ready to vacate their real estate, and a metal grate will serve as a bed tonight for some. It's war out there, life and death on the streets. And every day before the sun reaches its zenith, on every block nearby, it's war for every person whose skin is the wrong color, for every struggling single mother, every child who goes unfed, every patient that can't afford that hospital bed, every fearful family made to feel that the lack of documents could somehow make them illegitimate, every person still paid less for the body that they inhabit, every person feeling forced into a gender identity that someone else constructed. Everyone who's been judged for being too emotional or not emotional enough, having too many extra pounds, not enough pounds. People who don't conform to conventions and norms, the nobodies, the outliers, the overlooked, the cast aside, the screwed over. It's war out there on every block and down every street. And maybe sometimes it's not just out there. Maybe sometimes it's in here too. But you know, it's easy not to recognize it as war. Circumstances we don't share are easy enough to ignore and face it, right? We've heard this 100, maybe 1,000 times before. But struggles like these never escaped the prophets, you know? They were the seers, the ones who perceived injustice, who saw oppression and who spoke out against exploitation and marginalization. Little ever escaped the prophets. They were the seers. Maybe it's easier to miss what the prophets saw because the way people talk about the gift of prophecy nowadays, you'd think they were talking about a fortune cookie or something, right? Like, it's palatable, even sweet a little bit. Something that, when cracked open, dispenses some vague statement about the future that generally ends well for us. And hey, you know, too bad for the others if they don't get our good fortune. It's as though in our eagerness to rush to our happily hereafter, we skip right over the real world in front of us all along the way. Levites crossing to the other side of the road so as not to confront those whom society has beaten down and who has robbed and left for dead. But the prophets stopped. The prophets took notice. They were the seers. And they railed against abuse and injustice. Said the prophet Amos, "Seek the Lord and live, or he will break out against the house of Joseph like a fire, and it will devour Bethel with no one to quench it. Oh, you who turn justice to bitterness and bring righteousness to the ground, because you trample on the poor and take from them taxes of grains. Those houses you built out of hewn stone, you will not inhabit. And the wine from the vineyards you've planted, you shall not drink," said the prophet. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel described the prophets as people who employed notes an octave too high for our ears. In his book, The Prophets, aptly titled, pages 4 to 6, this is how he described them. To us, a single act of injustice, cheating in business, exploitation of the poor, is slight. To the prophets, a disaster. To us, injustice is injurious to the welfare of the people. To the prophets, a catastrophe, a threat to the world. He goes on to say, it seems incongruous and absurd that because of some minor acts of injustice inflicted on the insignificant, powerless poor, the glorious city of Jerusalem should be destroyed and the whole nation go into exile. And Heschel says this, a prophet is a person who feels fiercely. Prophecy is the voice that God has given to the silent agony, a voice to the plundered poor. To the profaned riches of the world, God is raging in the prophet's words. The prophet's images must not shine, they must burn. People talk about the prophetic gift, but for the prophets, the call to prophesy had very little with our fortune cookie prophecy. And it probably felt most of the time anything but a gift. Probably more of a curse, really. Of being called to prophesy, Jeremiah said, our passage of scripture for today, "Lord, you have enticed me, and I was enticed." Other translations use stronger language still to convert the Hebrew idea into English. Compelled, induced, even deceived. Lord, you have deceived me, and I was deceived. You've overpowered me, and you've prevailed. I've become a laughingstock all day long, said the prophet. Everyone mocks me. For whenever I speak, I must cry out. I must shout. Violence and destruction, for the word of the Lord has become for me a reproach and a derision all day long. So if I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, then within me there's something like a fire burning shut up inside my bones. I'm weary with holding it in, and I cannot. And Jeremiah adds this then, cursed be the day that I was born. This is cheery stuff, huh? May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Why did I ever come out of the womb? To see trouble and sorrow and to end my days in shame. The curse of prophecy. And Amos felt similarly. He said, they hate the one who reproves in the gate, and they abhor the one who speaks the truth. And then to the prophet Ezekiel came this word, and you, O mortal, do not be afraid of them. Don't be afraid of their words, though briars and thorns surround you, and you live among scorpions. Do not be afraid of their words, and do not be dismayed at their looks, for they are a rebellious house of people. For those prophets speaking a word on behalf of God against injustice and oppression must oftentimes have felt like a curse. And it came as a curse for all those who have stood in the prophetic tradition ever since. For Mahatma Gandhi, who devoted his life to nonviolent resistance against oppressive colonizers, and he paid with his life. It also came as a curse for Martin King, who led the March for Equality and who spoke with fire in his eyes against his nation's wars of choice, and he paid with his life. It also came as a curse for Viola Gregg Liuzzo, a housewife and a mother from Detroit, who drove alone to Alabama to help with the Selma March after seeing televised reports of the attack at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. She was driving marchers back to Selma from Montgomery when she was shot and killed by a Klansman in a passing car. She paid with her life. And then, of course, there's Jesus, whose words, as they are recorded in Luke 13:34, still speak to us. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you, how often I've longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Jesus stood in the long shadow of the prophets. He too spoke out against abusers and on behalf of the abused. He pronounced curses on the self-righteous and upended the exploitative power structures of his day, and he paid with his life. My impression is that this congregation knows something of the curse of prophecy too. I've only watched from a distance the story that's unfolded here in Hollywood, and I've only heard in bits and pieces about what at least seems to me to be the hurt that sometimes come along with the story here. I know that the story is complicated. I know, too, that this congregation has a reputation, a legacy of championing justice in this community, not here in LA only, but throughout the United States and the world. I know that this congregation has stood alongside the marginalized, and that doing so has brought challenges, sometimes, and negative repercussions. I know that this congregation shares the prophet's deep compassion for humanity and the prophet's hope for a better world. And so I want to say to you, prophesy. When the Spirit of the Lord comes on you, prophesy. In the places where religion has been reduced to claiming blessings for those inside while denying the concerns of those on the outside, prophesy. Whenever religion means praying for God's will to be done while denying God's love to others, prophesy with the words of Amos and say, I hate, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. Instead, let justice roll like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Prophesy when the Spirit comes on you. And when you see exclusion happening on the basis of gender, or race, or orientation, or age, or any pretext that anybody uses to discriminate, prophesy. Prophesy and say in the words of Joel, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and your daughters will prophesy. Your old will dream dreams, and your young will see visions too. Prophesy when the Spirit comes on you. And when you confront people who have given up, for whom life has beaten down, when you hear people say that humanity is getting worse and worse and society is just going down the drain, prophesy. Prophesy along with Ezekiel and say, listen, you dead and dried out bones. Hear this word. This is what the Sovereign One says to these dry bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come back to life. I will attach tendons to you, and make flesh come upon you and cover you up with skin. I will put breath in you, and you will be fully alive again. Prophesy when the Spirit comes upon you. And in the face of bigotry, intolerance, and hatred in the world, prophesy. Prophesy with the words of Micah and say, you have been shown, O mortal, what is good. And what does God require of you? But to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Prophesy when the Spirit of the Lord comes upon you. And I'll promise you this, standing in the prophetic tradition, shoulder to shoulder with those who through the ages have stood up on the side of the oppressed against injustice, standing alongside Ezekiel and Jeremiah, Amos, Joel, Gandhi, and Martin King, and Jesus. And every one who bears prophetic witness, I promise you this. The words of prophecy will come as a curse at times. They always have. But the words of the prophets change things. And for the huddling and the struggling, the cast out, the tired out, and the beaten down, prophecy may be the best gift that we have to offer. The world needs prophets. And so I say to you, Hollywood, prophesy.